Hi beautiful people, welcome to Yele Stitches channel. As you can tell, I am feeling myself seriously in these bands. Like, they always make my behind look so nice. They are high-waisted and free-fitting. So you know what, stick with me and let me show you how to make this band so you can be feeling yourself as well. You understand now? Let's do this together. To make this pants, you're going to need about 2 yards of fabric. So just have that in mind. About 2 to 2.5 yards of fabric. So when you fold your fabric at first, you need it to be the circumference of your tie with an extra 1 inch seam allowance. So if the circumference of your tie, for example, is 25, you're going to divide that into 2 since your fabric is on fold. So that's going to be 12.5, and you're going to add 1 inch to make it 13.5. So your fabric should have 13.5 or should be 13.5 on fold. All right, so the next thing I want to measure are our horizontal measurements, bearing in mind that you have a waistband of 1.5 inches. So normally waist to hip is 9 inches, but because I'm removing the 1.5 inch from it is 7.5, and then I'm adding 0.5 inches for seam allowance, that makes it 8 in total. So that's why I measured 8. Now the roundness of the hip is 40 inches, so plus 1 inch seam allowance, that made it 11 inches. That's 40 divided by 4 plus 1, that's 11 inches. The next one we want to measure is our crotch depth. Now the formula for crotch depth is hip divided by 4. So because this person's hip is 40 inches, I'm just going to use hip divided by 4, which is 10. Now after getting my 10 inches, I'm also then going to add 3 inches extra because this is an high waist trouser, so that puts it at 13 inches. Now remember that there is a 1.5 inch band that is going to be removed from it, so that makes it 13.5 minus 1.5, and that is 12. Now because this my client is pretty tall, I'm going to just add extra 0.5 inches for her, that makes it 12.5, and then I'm going to have a front slant of 1 inch, so everything ended up being about 13.5 inches. I know it's looking a little bit complex, but believe me, if you read through it, you will completely understand what I'm trying to say. So now I just drew a straight line from my crotch depth up to my top of my fabric, and the next thing is I measure my tie measurements and added 1 inch seam allowance. So the tie measurement I use is 12.5 plus 1 inch makes it 13.5. Now at that edge, that's just the entirety of my fabric, as you can see. So I just drew my curve all the way to the top. So your crotch curve is your crotch curve ends is where your tie begins. So that's why both of them just land on the same exact spot. So there's another method where they ask you to measure your hip measurement, for example, and divide it by 4 and add that extra as your crotch distance. It still ends up being exactly the same thing because your hip measurement is 10 divided by 4 is 2.5, and that's exactly the amount of extra that was there that would have been the crotch curve anyways. So just make sure that you get the correct measurement of your tie and you'll be all good. You don't need to do all that extra measuring and whatever. So you see me putting the slants at the top. I went down by 1 inch and I slanted it. So this slant is just so the trouser can accommodate your tummy, so that your tummy will not be tight in that particular place. That's the only reason why there is a slant at the top. Okay, so can you see my curve? I'm trying to zoom in to make sure you see the curve, even though the chalk is not as visible as I want it to be. So that is the nice curve for your front pattern. The next thing you want to do now is to just measure the length of the pants. I'm sure you already know how to get the length of your pants, just from your waist to the floor. Some people want their palazzo pants to sweep the nation. Some want their palazzo pants to end right on their ankle. So it depends on the length, your preferred length that you want. So whatever length it is that you want, just measure it on your fabric, bearing in mind that you still have a 1.5 inch band. So if your length is, let's say, 45 inches, make sure you remove your 1.5 inches band and then add 2 inches seam allowance. So if it is 45 inches, for example, you add 2 inches seam allowance, that makes it 47. Then remove your 1.5 inches for your band, so that makes it 45.5. So that is just an example of the length of your pants according to your own measurements. Okay, the next thing is just to cut it that's just like that's all. That's the entire story for the front pattern. You don't need to make your waist tiny or make your waist big with this style that I want to show you, because there is a rubber band or there is an elastic band to the waist, so you don't need to do anything to the waist. This is the easiest pattern that I've seen so far to make a palazzo pants, where you don't need to add a zipper or add buttons or whatever. It's just a nice elastic band that we are going to put at the waist. That's the reason why I didn't do anything to the waist. So I just used my hip measurements at the top and at the middle. So you see that is a straight line. It's just a simple straight line. There is nothing extra that should be done to the hip. Now the next thing is to cut my back pattern. So the front and back pattern are so very similar. The only difference is, first of all, your crotch length is different, and your crotch depth is also a little bit different. So your crotch length for the back should be 3 inches longer or 3.5 inches longer than the front. Now it is 3 inches longer if your hip measurement is less than 40, but if it is not less than 40, you should use 3.5 inches longer at the crotch length, not at the crotch depth. The crotch depth, I'm just adding extra 1 inch. That is exactly what I'm doing right now. I just added the extra 1 inch and I'm drawing a slant up, okay, because it's the crotch depth that we want to be different. So that's just 1 inch up, and after that I add 2 inches round about. These 2 inches representing our seam allowance for our in seams, okay, because you are going to take 0.5 in 4 places. That's the reason why we're adding this extra 2 inches round about it. But the crotch side, you add 3.5 inches and not 2 inches. You add 3 inches if the hips is less than 40. If the hips are greater than 40, you add 3.5 inches only at the crotch side, but everywhere else you add 2 inches. Everybody say 2. Okay, don't worry, I can hear you from your house. You are saying 2. I hear you, I feel you. All right, so I'm just going to draw that curve to where my hip goes out. See, I'm still working on my camera game. I'm so sorry, guys. Like, my camera game, it will be one day on, one day off. I don't get it. Like, everything was in frame before. Everything was in frame, but I don't know what happened. The thing, it framed me. It framed me up. Instead of it to be framed, it's framing me. That's just the only thing I can say. But I will keep getting better. I promise I'll keep getting better with this my camera game, and I'll make sure that everything is within frame of my camera. But you see me, I'm still adding the 2 inches, and after adding all the 2 inches, I'm just going to cut out my back pattern. 2 inches everywhere, 3.5 or 3 inches at the crotch area, but 2 inches everywhere, and a 1 inch rise for the back, a 1 inch rise for the crotch length at the back. So now I'm just cutting out my back pattern. Cut, snip. All right. The next thing to do is to just cut your back rise and then cut your front drop, or is it front low? You know, the rise and the up, that's it. Everything have rise and low. So the front has a drop while the back has a rise, and I just cut both of them separately. And now I'm just going to split my front pattern into 2 the way I was supposed to. I did not split it into 2, I just left it on fold earlier, but now I'm just splitting it into the way it's supposed to. So just split the front and split the back, and that's it. And you see, we are going to sew the crotch line for the front and sew the crotch line for the back as well. Now we're moving on to the pockets. Pockets. Now this is the pattern for my pocket. I'm going to put it again on the board now so you can take a screenshot. I always use this pattern when I'm making inseam pockets, that is inside the seam or by the side seams pockets. This is a pattern I always use, so I advise you to just create this pattern once and for all and always use it, you know, the way I'm doing it. You know, work smart, don't work hard. See me, I'm a motivational speaker. Alright, so I use the pattern to cut out my pocket pattern for both sides of my trouser. So after doing that, you see that I did not cut one side, I left one side unfold. So I am showing you the side I'm just going to sew with my sewing machine. So I'm just going to sew only those two sides with my sewing machine, but not that side that is unfold. So now we're moving on to the sewing proper. I have a serger, but I don't like to use it, so I have a way to make my dresses neat. So you see that I'm sewing on the right side. It is not a mistake. I'm sewing on the right side first with a zigzag stitch. After sewing on that right side, I'm going to just turn it inside like this. You see the way I did it, and then I'm going to sew with a straight stitch all the way down the part that I just sewed with a zigzag stitch. So that makes the inside and the outside of my dress look very neat, or any creation that I make, it makes the inside and the outside look very neat, because I pride myself in making it look neat even though I'm not using a serger. So this is just for everyone out there who doesn't have a serger or who doesn't like to use sergers. Okay, so I'm going to use the same technique also to make my pockets neat. So I'm going to first of all sew with a zigzag stitch. Now remember that this side of the pocket is the only part that is going to be sewn, but we are going to leave about 0.5 inches without sewing. That 0.5 inches is how we are going to attach this pocket to the pants. So up and down we are going to leave about 0.5 inches allowance, or leave it without sewing, so we can easily attach our pockets to our pants. Now after sewing with a zigzag stitch, I'm also going to sew with a straight stitch, also still leaving the 0.5 inches. Don't go and sew with a straight stitch and sew everything. No, still leave that 0.5 inches that we were talking about in the beginning of the pocket sewing. Sure, you get my vibe, you feel my vibe. All right, so after that, before I insert my pocket, I'm just going to stitch 1 inch at the top of my pants, just 1 inch at the top of my pants, first with a zigzag stitch like I have been doing, and then with a straight stitch, so that side is also pretty neat. Now after doing this, I can now attach my pockets in piece and know that it will look neat when I attach it. I did it for both sides. Of course, what you do for A, you do for B, as you know, as per usual. So all right, so I'm going to now take my pocket and then I'm going to open it right side to right side, right side to right side. You open your pocket. Remember the 0.5 inches that we left out? This is the purpose. So we open that tiny 0.5 inches and sew it on right side to right side of the inside of your pocket, where your 1 inch that you sewed before stop. So I'm just going to sew it to where the other 0.5 inches stop. You see where the other 0.5 inches is, and I just sew it down the back stitch. Then that is just the tiny sewing that I'm showing you, and then I do it for this other side too, so you can see it very well. I'm going to bring it the other way so you can see the pocket side instead of that of the side I was going to show it for. Okay, so be fast, please be fast, my dear. Turn it. Okay, so that is it. I'm just sewing it with a straight stitch to the top of where my 1 inch stopped, just like that. I hope you understand or you get my point of what I just did. You see your pocket is already done like that, just like that. Your pocket is done, like no stress, no problem. Abracadabra, we've bragged and we have dabrad. All right, so from the bottom of my trouser, I zigzag stitch again. You see, I did not start from the top, so I will not confuse myself, and so you will also not confuse yourself. I started from the bottom of the trouser. I'm making a zigzag stitch all the way to where my pocket ends. So I'm sewing. You can see where my pocket ends. I'm already getting near that end, and then I'm just going to stop right where my pocket ends with my zigzag stitch. After that, I'm going to then flip it. All right, the way I've been doing before to make it neat. I'm going to then flip it again and then sew with a straight stitch from the bottom also again right to where the pocket ended. If you have any questions, if you have any suggestions, if you have anything to say to me, I am always open to these things in the comment section. So please do not forget to give me your concerns, bear it at the table of the comment section, and let Yele listen to you, and let Yele help in any way that she can possibly help. All right, so yes, back to my sewing. I am just going to sew back to where, like, right where my pocket stopped, maybe 0.5 inches after where my pocket stopped. So like it's, very nice and cohesive. So it's a very nice and cohesive and smooth ending. Now after doing that and putting my pocket on one side, you are going to repeat that same old process for the other side. This way that I'm doing it is not compulsory for everybody. You can just sew it straight normally without this double sewing, but I just want my work to be very, very neat, you understand, on the inside. So on that pocket place, I just folded it into two. You see the pocket seam allowance, I'm just folding it into two to make it a nice M in that side too. The sewing allowance that we sewed earlier, of course, when we attach the pockets, I'm just sewing it inside and making that place also very neat. I'm just hemming it, as you can see me do. I'm just hemming it. Everything on this trouser will be very fine and tantalicious, and it'll be inside and outside. It will be beautiful for my client. Oh yes. All right. So after doing that, I'm going to repeat that same process for the second side, or you should also repeat it for the other side if you are following my steps and my strategies as we are going on this journey. All right, so I'm just going to repeat that for the other side of my trouser. I'm going to also repeat that side for the inseams of my trouser, to repeat the style for the inseam of my trouser, to make sure the inseam of the trouser is also pretty neat. And then I'm going to hem the down part. After hemming the down part, my entire trouser, it will already be ready for the viewing. It now remains band. Now, because I don't want this video to be too long, my dear sisters and brothers and ladies and gentlemen, what I'm going to do is make another video to show you how I attach the band to these trousers, because if I do it in this video also, it is going to be so very long, and I know that you have other things that you want to do and you not just want to sit here and hear me yapping. So I promise next week I will upload a video on how I put the band on this trouser, and I'm showing you how the inside is extremely neat. You say, don't you want your pants to be neat like this? All right, so I'm going to see you next week with a video on how to attach the band of the trouser. Bear with me and forgive me in advance for this tiny ad break that I'm giving you, but stay tuned. Put on your notification bell so you will not miss how to put this band on this trouser. I'm going to see you next week with this your malicious video. Have a wonderful rest of your day or night, and don't forget to subscribe, like, share if you enjoyed this. See ya. Bye.